For 3 decades, Johnny Carson warmly welcomed America into their living rooms, 5 nights a week, as the host of The Tonight Show. He was the epitome of cool professionalism, the unflappable late-night king who could handle any surprise with his trademark wit and charm. Yet even the composed Johnny Carson, known for his seamless control on air, occasionally found himself caught off guard by unpredictable chaos during live broadcasts. A longtime producer from The Tonight Show, who worked closely with Carson for over 10 years, shared insight into these rare moments. Johnny always took pride in being ready for anything, but sometimes the unexpected happened, moments where even he couldn't keep that famous cool composure and would just lose it right there on national television. Today, we're diving into the 16 most insane, unscripted, unforgettable moments from Johnny Carson's 30-year tenure. Those times when the king of late night found himself at the mercy of his guests' emotions or bizarre events no one could have foreseen. Among these, the moment ranked number 8 stands out, having generated more viewer mail than nearly any other, shocking some, yet delighting others with Carson's unguarded honesty. But before we reveal that, let's rewind to an unforgettable scene involving a tomahawk demonstration that sparked what might be the most legendary laughing fit in the history of television. 1. But Ed Ames' tomahawk disaster. All began as a simple demonstration. Ed Ames, starring as Mingo on NBC's popular series, Daniel Boone, visited The Tonight Show in April 1965 to showcase the art of tomahawk throwing, a skill his character frequently displayed on the frontier drum. The segment opened normally. Ames detailed the proper throwing technique, while Carson listened attentively. Then, a wooden silhouette resembling a cowboy was brought out to serve as a target. Ames readied himself to throw. What happened next would become television history. Ames hurled the tomahawk with precision, but the blade landed squarely in the wooden figure's crotch. The studio audience burst into laughter, yet it was Carson's reaction that immortalized this moment as one of TV's most iconic. Johnny lost it completely, recalled a director present in the control room that evening. We had seen him laugh before, but never like this. Carson doubled over, tears streaming down his face, utterly unable to speak for what felt like several minutes. His laughter fit, lasting nearly 3 minutes, felt like an eternity in live television. When he finally caught his breath, Carson delivered a perfectly timed quip that sent the audience into fresh hysterics, brilliantly showcasing his unparalleled talent for turning unexpected moments into comedic gold. What made this moment so special was not just the accident, but how Carson's genuine and infectious reaction turned an ordinary demonstration into an unforgettable piece of TV history. That unforgettable instant was a rare glimpse into Johnny Carson's true self, stripped of all pretense. The polished veneer slipped away entirely as he gave into bursts of uncontrollable laughter. That moment captured exactly why Johnny was so adored, explained a former NBC executive. In an era dominated by carefully curated celebrity images, viewers were offered a candid and genuine view of Johnny completely losing his composure. Authenticity like that is a rarity on television. 2. Don Rickles breaks Carson's cherished cigarette box. Johnny Carson was famously meticulous about his set, where every item had its perfect place. Among these was a wooden cigarette box, a personal treasure he cherished deeply. So, when Don Rickles guest hosted The Tonight Show in October 1973 and accidentally broke that very cigarette box, he immediately understood the gravity of his misstep. The following night, Carson returned to the show and wasted no time addressing the damage live on air, showing the audience the broken box and promises of retribution against Rickles. However, no one, not even Rickles, could have anticipated the unique and hilarious way Carson would exact his playful revenge. Months later, Carson learned Rickles was filming his sitcom, CPO Sharky, nearby on an NBC soundstage. In an unprecedented and spontaneous act, Carson decided to crash Rickles' live taping with cameras in tow to confront him about the cigarette box incident directly. It happened completely on the spur of the moment, shared a Tonight Show producer who was there. Johnny looked at us during a commercial break and said, "Isn't Rickles taping today? Let's go over there." Grabbing whatever equipment was at hand, the crew dashed across the studio lot. What followed remains one of the most spontaneous, side-splitting moments in Carson's tenure. He barged onto Rickles' set mid-taping, leaving the CPO Sharky audience utterly bewildered. Rickles, clad in his Navy uniform and caught in the middle of a scene, was genuinely stunned by Carson's unexpected entrance. This come-dick moment instantly became a television classic, replayed endlessly over the years. 3. When Bette Midler moves Carson to tears as Johnny Carson's iconic 30-year run on The Tonight Show neared its conclusion in May 1992. The final episodes grew increasingly poignant. The penultimate episode, featuring Robin Williams and Bette Midler, was anticipated to be entertaining, but no one foresaw the profoundly touching moment that would stand out as one of Carson's most memorable goodbyes. Toward the episode's close, Midler altered the mood by announcing she wished to sing something intimate and special for the departing host. She then delivered a heartfelt rendition of "One for My Baby and One More for the Road," the timeless standard by Harold Arlen and Johnny Mercer dealing with farewells and last calls. Singing directly to Carson, Midler's performance was so moving that the camera captured an extraordinary sight. Johnny Carson, the embodiment of composure and control on television, with tears welling up in his eyes. The studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop, recalled a sound engineer present that night. When Midler's song came to an end, Carson leaned forward to gently kiss her hand. Then, looking directly into the camera, he simply said, "I can't," a moment that lingered in everyone's hearts. Johnny Carson, the legendary host of The Tonight Show, was known for his cool, collected on-air persona over 3 remarkable decades. Night after night, he brought countless guests and extraordinary moments into living rooms across America. Among these, his encounters with animal handlers and their exotic creatures often added a delightful unpredictability. One unforgettable instance was during a 1979 episode featuring Joan Embry and her lively capuchin monkey. The segment began just like any other. Joan and her capuchin appeared calm and well-behaved. However, in a sudden and hilarious twist, the monkey leapt straight onto Johnny Carson's head. A camera operator later recalled the scene vividly. One moment the monkey was perched quietly, and the next it was joyfully using Johnny's iconic hair as its very own jungle gym. One moment, the of Ryan Maui's. As the monkey finally scampered back to its handler, Johnny faced the camera with his hair sticking up in wild disarray. With a perfectly timed deadpan expression, he quipped, "And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why I prefer cats." The studio audience instantly erupted in laughter, reveling in this unexpected and charming moment. This episode highlights perfectly how, despite Johnny's impeccable style and preparedness, live television was always full of surprises. His equanimity was legendary, but even he couldn't fully control these spontaneous bursts of chaos. Moments like these are just a glimpse into the many unscripted, astonishing events that unfolded over Carson's illustrious 30-year run. Experiences that showcased not only his quick wit, but also the unpredictability that made live TV endlessly entertaining. From animal antics to shocking events that left viewers stunned or delighted, Johnny Carson's Tonight Show remains etched in television history for these genuine and unforgettable moments. Let's dive into one of television's most unforgettable moments involving Ed Ames and his tomahawk demonstration. Back in April 1965, Ed Ames, known for his role as Mingo on NBC's popular series, Daniel Boone, visited The Tonight Show to showcase the skill his character so deftly displayed on the frontier drama, tomahawk throwing. The segment began perfectly. Ames stood ready, explaining the proper throwing technique while Johnny Carson listened intently. A wooden silhouette resembling a cowboy was wheeled out as the target. Ames took aim, poised for a flawless throw. But what happened next became instantly legendary. Ames threw the tomahawk with remarkable precision, yet it landed directly in the wooden figure's crotch. The studio erupted in laughter, but it was Carson's reaction that truly immortalized the moment. According to a director present in the control room that night, Johnny just lost it completely. We'd seen him laugh before, but never this hard. He was bent over, tears streaming down his face, totally unable to get a word out for what must have been several minutes. That burst of laughter stretched nearly 3 minutes, an eternity on live television. When Carson finally regained his composure, he struck with a perfectly timed quip that sent the audience into fresh hysterics. But, that's indefinite. All right. Right. I didn't even know you were Jewish. This spontaneous line captured Carson's genius, finding the perfect punchline on the fly, turning a simple mishap into a comedic masterpiece. What made this incident truly special was the genuine, unfiltered reaction from Carson. In a time when celebrity images were carefully managed, here was a moment of pure authenticity. That moment showed why Johnny was so beloved, a former NBC executive reflected. Viewers saw him completely lose his composure. It was a rare and honest glimpse behind the curtain. The tomahawk incident has been replayed endlessly over the years, including during Carson's farewell week on air in 1992, cementing its place in television history as perhaps the most spontaneously perfect moment in The Tonight Show's entire run. Now on to another memorable story, Don Rickles and the infamous cigarette box mishap. Johnny Carson was famously particular about his set. The placement of every item on his desk was deliberate, especially his treasured wooden cigarette box. So imagine the tension when, during an October 1973 episode, while guest hosting, Don Rickles accidentally broke that cigarette box. The very next night, Carson returned to his seat and addressed the incident head-on, displaying the damaged box to the audience and promising some form of payback against Rickles. Little did anyone, including Rickles himself, realize what form that payback would ultimately take. Several months later, Carson discovered that Rickles was filming on a bustling NBC soundstage nearby during the filming of the sitcom CPO Sharky. An unexpected twist was brewing. Johnny Carson, known for his control behind the desk, made a bold and unplanned decision. During a commercial break, he suddenly turned to the production team and asked, "Isn't Don Rickles taping today? Let's go over there." Without hesitation, the crew grabbed their cameras and equipment and sprinted across the studio lot to join Rickles' set. This spontaneous dash led to one of the most memorable, unscripted moments in Carson's career. Carson burst onto the set mid-taping, catching the CPO Sharky audience completely off guard. Rickles, clad in his Navy uniform and deep into his scene, froze in shock as Carson confronted him. "They told me you broke it on the show last night," Carson exclaimed, pointing to the cigarette box. Rickles stammered, "Well, I really—" But Carson wouldn't let him off the hook. "You can't," he said firmly. Then, with a softer tone, he added, "But I'm sorry about the box." I'll come up with something. Rickles responded. I hope so. But just keep me on your show. You mean so much to me? Johnny replied warmly. No, please. Don't humble yourself. I want to be with you. So, don't humble yourself. Amidst the exchange, Rickles protested, I was in the middle of a scene, but Carson shot back. I don't care about your scene. You broke my cigarette box. What made this moment so special wasn't just its spontaneity. It revealed a genuine bond between the two men. Carson's mock outrage blended seamlessly with his affection, while Rickles clearly enjoyed being ambushed by his usually reserved friend. One director who worked with both recalled, Johnny would have done that with just anyone. It showed how much he truly loved Dawn and how comfortable they were together. Johnny was always in control of his show, but with Dawn, he was willing to be the butt of the joke. The scene quickly became legendary, replayed countless times, and remembered as a rare glimpse of Carson letting spontaneity take the reins. Later, on another unforgettable Tonight Show moment, the spotlight turned to Bette Midler as the final episodes of Johnny Carson's 30-year run neared. In May 1992, during the penultimate show featuring Robin Williams and Midler, audiences expected laughter and entertainment, but what unfolded went far deeper. Toward the end of the episode, after a lively conversation filled with banter, Midler shifted gears. She announced she wanted to sing something special for Carson's farewell. With heartfelt emotion, she performed One for My Baby and One More for the Road, the classic by Harold Arlen and Johnny Mercer, a song about last calls and bittersweet goodbyes. As Midler's tender voice filled the studio, an unmistakable poignancy settled over the moment, a fitting tribute to a beloved host saying goodbye to decades of nightly companionship. As the camera focused in on Johnny Carson, something extraordinary unfolded on television. Johnny, the epitome of composure, his eyes glistening with tears. Those tears were so unexpected that the studio fell into a hushed silence. A sound engineer who was present that night recalled, "You could have heard a pin drop in the studio. Everyone, the crew, the audience, they all sensed we were witnessing an incredibly intimate moment." Johnny wasn't just opening up on camera. He was bidding farewell to 3 decades of his life. Johnny Carson was known for his tightly controlled persona. Though charming and witty, he rarely let his true feelings show openly. But in that moment, the barriers dissolved entirely. A director involved in the show's final episodes commented, Johnny didn't try to hide his emotions or lighten the mood with a joke. Instead, he embraced the moment with Bette Midler and all of us. It was profoundly moving because we all knew how seldom he showed that vulnerable side. When Midler concluded her heartfelt tribute, Johnny leaned forward to gently kiss her hand, a simple yet deeply meaningful gesture of gratitude. Then, gazing directly into the camera, he said softly, "I can't top that." This became one of television's most genuine moments, where even the famously reserved Johnny Carson allowed his real feelings to shine through amid a life-changing transition. Suddenly, it felt as if he was just becoming comfortable enough to reveal his true self. In a lighter anecdote from his show, Johnny once found himself at the mercy of an unexpected visitor on his head. The segment featured animal handler Joan Embry and her capuchin monkey in 1979. While Joan spoke about the monkey's habits, the primate saw Johnny's famously styled hair as an irresistible playground. A camera operator recounted, without any warning, the monkey leapt right onto Johnny's head. One moment it was calm, and the next it was using his hair like a jungle gym. What made this incident unforgettable wasn't just the monkey's antics, but Johnny's own reaction. He didn't panic or ask for help. Instead, he sat perfectly still. A makeup artist from the show explained, Johnny's hair was sacred, always perfect, not a single strand out of place. To see it ruined by a monkey while Johnny just stayed calm with that deadpan expression was pure comedy gold. When the monkey finally hopped back to its handler, the studio applauded Johnny's unflappable grace in the face of such unexpected chaos. Carson glanced straight into the camera, his hair wildly tousled in every direction, and delivered with impeccable timing. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why I prefer cats. The studio erupted in laughter, the audience delighting in the moment. What made this scene especially memorable was how it perfectly highlighted Carson's standout quality as a host. His uncanny ability to draw humor from spontaneous chaos without ever appearing flustered or losing his calm. One longtime producer reflected, that was Johnny at his absolute best. He understood the audience wasn't laughing at him, but laughing alongside him at the sheer absurdity unfolding. He always grasped that difference, and he didn't mind being part of the joke, so long as it was genuinely funny. This monkey mishap quickly became a highly requested clip from the show's archives. A quintessential example of Carson's knack for maintaining his dignified persona, even amid the most undignified chaos. Shifting gears, it's a particular pleasure of mine to introduce a man known for incredible illusions. Please join me in welcoming the amazing Flight 9. Now moving on, let's talk about one of the most outrageously hilarious routines ever performed on The Tonight Show in 1980. Steve Martin's absurd magic act. By then, Martin was carving out a niche as a trailblazer in anti-comedy, a style rooted in deliberate awkwardness, absurdity, and often purposefully nonsensical humor. For this appearance, Martin announced he'd perform a magic act, prompting Carson to graciously step aside and give him the spotlight. What followed was one of the strangest, most laugh-inducing performances the show ever witnessed. Martin's grateful identity bit involved him pretending to unzip his pants and pull out an assortment of objects, a series of eggs, a salt shaker, a ringing telephone, and eventually a tiny hand that waved at the audience. A writer from the show recalled the magic was really in watching Johnny's reaction. At first, he played the straight man, but as the skit grew increasingly absurd, you could see him genuinely losing control, not just faking laughter, but truly caught off guard by Martin's full commitment to the act. By the routine's end, Carson was doubled over, struggling to keep his composure as Martin delivered every punchline with perfectly straight-faced seriousness. What made that moment special was the clear joy Carson experienced in being genuinely caught by surprise by Martin's bizarre creativity. One producer who worked closely with both men added, Johnny loved being truly entertained. Over the years, he'd seen countless comedians, but very few could truly surprise him. Steve was one of those rare performers who could make Johnny feel like an ordinary audience member again, someone who didn't know exactly what was coming next. Since then, this routine has been celebrated as a perfect example of Martin's groundbreaking comedic style, flipping expectations, reveling in absurdity, and mining humor from deliberate discomfort. For Carson, it was a rare chance to step beyond his usual role and just enjoy the ride. Step out of the usual host role and simply revel in being swept up by another performer's unique vision. This was the magic Johnny Carson often found on his show. One day, after the camera stopped rolling, Johnny was still laughing. The producer recalled fondly. He turned to me and said, "That's the kind of thing that makes this job truly worth doing." Coming from a man who had interviewed countless stars and witnessed all kinds of performances, that was high praise indeed. Believe in comedy's power to heal. Celebrate that extraordinary gift. Praise the message of hope symbolized by faith, while everyday life rolled on, like Sears having a sale where furniture became suddenly affordable. Now, Let's dive into a particularly explosive chapter of late-night history. 6. Robin Williams breaks all the rules. When Robin Williams was a guest on The Tonight Show, the carefully crafted, polished structure of late-night television was flipped on its head and replaced by pure, exhilarating chaos. Williams, with his boundless manic energy and lightning-fast improvisational talent, simply could not be contained within Johnny Carson's usual interview form. Johnny once said Robin was like trying to catch lightning in a bottle while it was already running wild, shared a Tonight Show writer who had witnessed several of Williams' unforgettable appearances. While most guests followed Johnny's lead, Robin was one of the rare ones who actually forced Johnny to follow his. One particularly legendary appearance happened in the early 1980s. Though Robin was technically there to promote a film, within moments of sitting down, he erupted into a flurry of rapid-fire impressions. He jumped out of the guest chair to perform a physical comedy bit, even turning Carson's iconic desk into an impromptu stage for what looked like a spontaneous, unplanned performance. Back in the control room, producers would be in a full-on panic, revealed a director who worked closely on Williams' visits. They kept shouting, "Where is he going with this? Should we cut to commercial?" But Johnny would just wave them off. He understood that with Robin, the only way was to let go and enjoy the ride. Amid the uproar, imagine Robin exclaiming in jest, "And yet, behold the fool! Now forced into wearing designer jeans for no good reason, I will walk." Meanwhile, the cameraman scrambled, whispering, "Where's he going now? What I follow?" What made these appearances so special was watching Johnny Carson himself, usually firmly in control, willingly hand over the reins to Robin's wild genius. Instead of steering the conversation back to the carefully prepared questions, Johnny would lean back, occasionally wiping tears of laughter from his eyes, relishing the role of an audience member rather than a host. Johnny loved how Robin always kept him on his toes, a producer explained. After thousands of interviews following predictable scripts, Robin was gloriously unpredictable. Johnny once told me, "I never know what's going to happen when Robin sits down." That was the highest compliment he could give a guest. Williams' appearances became such a phenomenon that Johnny would actually prep the audience beforehand, essentially warning them to expect the unexpected. It was one of the rare times Carson admitted his usual format might not apply, an acknowledgement that spoke volumes about Robin Williams' singular talent. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, names like Marco Mangialazzo drifted in the conversation, distinctive characters in this vibrant tapestry of television history. Bambino Bombado, a whisper, a memory, part of the mosaic that made these moments unforgettable. Thursday night, the spotlight was on Don Rickles as he took on a legendary figure in showbiz, Frank Sinatra. It was 1976, and Sinatra was The Tonight Show's guest, bringing with him the almost untouchable aura of a superstar. Known not only for his incredible talents, but also for his fiery temperament and powerful Hollywood connections, Sinatra was the kind of celebrity most comedians would think twice about teasing. Yet, Don Rickles didn't hesitate. Sitting right next to Sinatra on Johnny Carson's famous couch, Rickles launched into one of his signature roasts, treating the chairman of the board with as much irreverent humor as if he was roasting any other member of the audience at his nightclub acts. "Look at him," Rickles started casually, pointing at Sinatra. "He's the big star. He makes his grand entrance, and everyone thinks he's just wonderful. Well, let me tell you something. This man is overrated." As Rickles kept up his relentless but good-natured ribbing, the camera subtly caught Johnny Carson's face, a mix of nervous laughter and genuine worry over how Sinatra might take the jabs. A producer from that night later recalled, Johnny was actually on edge. He'd seen Sinatra's temper over the years, and he knew Frank wasn't always the easiest target for jokes. There was real tension in the studio. Everyone wondered, Would Frank laugh it off or lose his cool? Things hit their peak when Rickles, true to form, casually grabbed Sinatra's knee and said with a grin, "Frank, believe me, I'm only kidding. You know I love you. Can I get a ride home?" To the relief of everyone watching, Sinatra broke into a hearty, genuine laugh. It was clear he appreciated Rickles' boldness, his choice to treat Sinatra without the usual deference, instead embracing the roast spirit, where no one was above the humor. "That took guts," Johnny confessed later to a producer. Don knew exactly where to draw the line, but it was still risky. Not many dared to speak to Frank that way, and lived to tell about it. This moment was more than just comedy gold. It was culturally significant. Sinatra, a man famous for managing his public image with iron control, had stepped into the light for a genuine roast, without any fallout. It was a rare glimpse of the icon letting down his guard. For Carson, who always aimed to craft a show where the unexpected could happen, this was a perfect showcase of live television's power. When big personalities collide with unfiltered humor, magic unfolds. Seeking to a clip or a lighter moment, as the conversation shifts to later, a different guest brought a different kind of charm. Dolly Parton, appearing on The Tonight Show in 1977, was already a household name known for her extraordinary musical talents and for her distinctive, curvaceous figure, which often featured in playful jokes she made about herself. During her interview, Carson and Dolly engaged in the playful, teasing banter that The Tonight Show was famous for. Their conversation flowed naturally, showcasing both Dolly's quick wit and sparkling personality. As the show went on, Johnny Carson made a remark that instantly became one of the most memorable and discussed moments in the history of his program. Glancing at Dolly Parton's revealing blouse, he quipped, "I'd give a year of my life just for a sneak peek beneath that blouse." The studio erupted into a mixture of shocked gasps and laughter. True to form, Dolly laughed it off with her trademark charm and professionalism, but the moment was irreversibly captured live on air. A director who was behind the scenes that night later recalled the tension in the control room, saying, "You could almost feel everyone holding their breath." At that time, such a comment was still borderline acceptable. However, for Johnny, who was known for his gentlemanly, on-air persona, this was unusually blunt. This particular comment sparked an unprecedented volume of viewer feedback. Some applauded Carson for his candidness, appreciating that he voiced what many might have privately thought. On the other hand, many criticized it harshly for being inappropriate and disrespectful. A former NBC executive reflected on the aftermath. Johnny never publicly addressed the uproar, but behind closed doors, he admitted to crossing a line. Interestingly, Dolly never showed any offense. She famously said she took the remark as a compliment rather than a slight. What made this incident so meaningful was how it highlighted the evolving standards of television and public etiquette. A comment like that might have gone unnoticed or unchallenged in prior decades, but by the 1980s, such remarks were increasingly scrutinized. This shift marked the beginning of a new era in how culture and media approached matters of respect and propriety. For Johnny Carson, who had spent decades mastering the delicate balance of what was acceptable on TV, this represented a rare lapse in judgment. "That line wouldn't be allowed on air today," noted a television historian, but it perfectly captures a fleeting moment when television was still navigating the tricky territory between candor and respect, between the private joke and public broadcast. Today, this incident remains one of the most cited highlights from Carson's 30-year legacy, demonstrating its impact not only on viewers but also on broader cultural discussions about celebrity, gender, and changing norms in public discourse. Shifting gears a bit, let me ask you, do you remember the name of that guy from Las Vegas? Who? Right. Yeah, he actually has a better job than you. He only works 2 hours a week. Now, let's talk about a legend named Bob Hope. Bob Hope was, without question, one of America's most cherished entertainers. His career spanned vaudeville, radio, films, and television. His multiple appearances on The Tonight Show had once been highlights that audiences eagerly anticipated. However, by the 1980s, a disappointing pattern had begun to emerge. Then, in his late 70s and early 80s, Hope would frequently show up with humor that felt outdated. He often relied on reading jokes directly from cue cards, seeming increasingly detached from the energy of the live audience. This shift inevitably affected how his segments were received. Johnny Carson dreaded those guest appearances, a show writer from that era revealed. Early in his career, Bob Hope had indeed been brilliant, but by this stage he was essentially going through the motions, endlessly recycling the same jokes about golf and politics that had become stale over years. What made these segments especially uncomfortable was witnessing Carson himself, a master of comedic timing, forced to fake enthusiasm for Hope's material, pretending the jokes landed better than they actually did. Johnny was too professional to ever openly complain, the writer added, but backstage after one particularly agonizing appearance, he muttered, "Hope doesn't listen, he just talks." That rare moment of candor came from a place of respect for a fellow comic, yet one whose act had sadly calcified with time. One of the most cringe-inducing appearances occurred in the mid-1980s, when Hope came with a set of jokes about contemporary events that felt distinctly stale and out of touch. As he read off his cards, seemingly oblivious to the audience's lukewarm reaction, Carson's expression revealed everything, equal parts courtesy and genuine discomfort. They performed a number titled The Lionsman Lament, which sounded surprisingly good considering, as one observer put it, they were singing through scar tissue. It was described as marvelous, yet the sparkle had undeniably faded. Johnny's smile grew tighter by the minute, recalled a camera operator who witnessed that night. He loosened his tie and exchanged a glance with Ed, his signal to the crew that things were going south, but he was determined to carry on. These moments carried a deep poignancy because of the sharp contrast between Hope's past brilliance and the frailty of his later appearances. Carson, who revered the traditions of comedy and the legends who forged its path, found himself in the difficult position of watching an icon who could no longer fully connect with his audience. It was like seeing Willie Mays in his final season. A producer reflected on several of Hope's last appearances. Johnny understood better than anyone that comedy is fleeting. What works in one era may fall flat in the next. Watching Hope's struggle was a sober reminder of his own mortality in the entertainment world. Despite private frustrations, Carson consistently treated Hope with public respect, underscoring his deep appreciation for show business history and his own place within. There were nights when Johnny felt Hope's presence so keenly, he would reach out to stroke his hair, only to realize the legend was no longer there. Then, a memorable moment came when Jimmy Stewart, a beloved frequent guest on The Tonight Show, appeared in 1981. Stewart's gentle, sometimes halting manner was a perfect complement to Carson's polished professionalism. During that visit, Stewart mentioned he had written a poem about his recently deceased dog, Bodo. Carson invited him to read it, probably expecting something lighthearted and easygoing. What was supposed to be a heartfelt tribute to a cherished pet turned into one of the most deeply moving moments in the history of the show. Stewart began by reading a poem titled Bio, which started off simply but gradually unfolded into a profound reflection on love, loyalty, and grief. And there are nights when I think I feel that stare, and I reach out my hand to stroke his hair. But he's not there. Oh, how I wish that wasn't so. I'll always love a dog named Bio. As Stewart completed the poem, the camera focused on Carson's reaction. The face of television's typically composed host visibly moved. Carson appeared momentarily speechless, touched in a way rarely seen on his show. Johnny was actually tearing up, revealed a director present in the control room that evening. Johnny was actually tearing up, revealed a director present in the control. This wasn't a performance for the cameras. It was Johnny Carson, the man, not the host, genuinely affected by Stewart's heartfelt words and delivery. The power of the moment lay in its sheer unexpectedness. In a format typically filled with light banter and promotional chatter, Stewart had offered something deeply sincere, and Carson responded with genuine emotion. Johnny didn't try to cover it up with a joke or rush to a commercial break. A producer who observed the exchange noted, "He gave that moment the dignity it deserved, signaling to the audience that it was okay to experience real feelings too." Such pure emotional exchanges were rare in late-night television, where wit and cleverness usually took center stage over heartfelt sincerity. This segment has since become one of the most memorable parts of Carson's 30-year tenure, not for humor or celebrity news, but for its simple, honest truth about love and loss, spoken by one American icon and met with open emotion by another. Switching gears, but still captivating, the next iconic episode involved Joan Embery from the San Diego Zoo, who was a frequent guest on The Tonight Show. She regularly brought exotic animals for Carson to interact with, resulting in moments that ranged from enthusiastic engagement to reluctant acceptance. One memorable appearance in the late 1970s featured several animals, including a notably large Burmese python. While Embery was sharing fascinating facts about the snake, it suddenly became more active than anticipated. Without warning, the python slithered off the desk and headed straight for Carson. His reaction was instant and completely unguarded. He sprang out of his chair with impressive speed and backed away, his face showing genuine alarm. The audience erupted in laughter at his unfiltered response. Johnny wasn't acting, it was his real reaction, recalled a floor director who witnessed the event. He was well known to be uneasy around intimidating animals. When that snake moved toward him, all the pretense vanished. The snake incident has since become legendary, illustrating the unpredictable and authentic moments that made The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson a beloved institution. Embery and her team quickly recaptured the moment, while Carson calmly returned to his chair, adjusted his tie, and delivered a perfectly timed punchline. "Somebody better check my pants." The audience erupted in laughter, captivated not just by the joke, but by how, in that instant, Carson's polished demeanor slipped away, revealing the genuine instinctive reaction many viewers themselves probably felt in such a situation. 12. George Carlin sneaks in a censorship jab. George Carlin built his career on challenging societal norms and pushing the limits of what was acceptable on television. His appearances on The Tonight Show were a tightrope walk, allowing Carlin to be true to his distinct style while respecting NBC's strict broadcast standards. During a 1983 appearance, Carlin delivered a seemingly innocent monologue filled with everyday observations. Yet, cleverly woven within it was a subtle critique aimed at television censorship. Carson immediately caught the nuance. "You could see it in Johnny's face," recalled a show writer. That quick smile and glance toward the camera. It was his way of signaling, "Yes, I caught that." Rather than cut Carlin off or reprimand him, Carson chose to let it slide. That silent nod of approval made the moment even more satisfying for viewers who understood the layered joke. Carson had a profound appreciation for sharp wit, and Carlin had masterfully delivered it. 13. Dean Martin appears drunk and kills. Dean Martin's entire public persona revolved around the charming, slightly inebriated entertainer. Whether his drunkenness was real or merely an act was part of his mystique. On one particularly memorable Tonight Show, Martin fully embraced this image, slurring his words, missing his chair by a hair when sitting down, and delivering punchlines with impeccable comedic timing. The audience adored every bit of it. Carson keenly played the straight man role, skillfully supporting Martin as he wandered through stories and jokes. Midway through a tale about a golf game, Martin suddenly paused, looked confused, then shrugged and said, who cares? It wasn't that funny anyway. The crowd burst into laughter, and Carson joined in wholeheartedly. This was a perfect example of two entertainment legends intuitively sensing their performances, understanding how to elevate each other's comedic rhythm. 14. Johnny crashes his own monologue. One evening in the early 1980s, something spectacular happened during Carson's monologue. Out of nowhere, Don Rickles began heckling loudly from backstage. The audience was initially puzzled, unsure what was unfolding. When Rickles' unmistakable voice rang out clearly, Carson paused momentarily. Instead of carrying on with his prepared remarks, he turned toward the curtain and called out, "Don, get out here!" Rickles sauntered onto the stage, feigning innocence, much to the delight of the audience. Seizing the spontaneous opportunity, Carson abandoned the rest of his monologue and invited Rickles to take a seat in the guest chair far earlier than planned. It was pure, unscripted spontaneity, a rare break from Carson's usual tight control over the show's flow, but one that enchanted everyone watching. When these moments hit their mark, the result was television that truly stuck with viewers. Take, for example, Sammy Davis Jr.'s stunning display of talent on The Tonight Show in the 1970s. Known as one of the most multifaceted performers ever to grace the program, Sammy was not just a singer or dancer or actor. He was all of those and a comedian rolled into one. During one casual interview, out of nowhere, he launched into a breathtaking barrage of rapid-fire impressions. He mimicked legends like Frank Sinatra, Jerry Lewis, and Jimmy Stewart with such precision it was uncanny. The voices matched perfectly, the gestures were spot on, and even their postures were replicated. Johnny Carson himself was doubled over with laughter, not the polite chuckles of a host, but genuine, uncontrollable laughter. According to a writer from the show, Johnny had once called Sammy the most complete entertainer he'd ever met. Watching him effortlessly switch between these distinct icons in mere seconds was like witnessing a true master at work. Then there's the unforgettable moment in the mid-1980s when Arnold Schwarzenegger appeared on The Tonight Show as a rising Hollywood action star. Johnny started with a typical opening question, but Arnold responded in German, a long, uninterrupted reply. Johnny was completely baffled, and the audience erupted in laughter at the unexpected twist. Instead of cutting the bit short, Johnny embraced the absurdity completely. He nodded as if understanding every word and responded with his own made-up German-sounding gibberish. This back and forth continued for nearly a full minute, turning the exchange into pure comedic gold. Eventually, Arnold broke character, chuckling as he switched back to English. He explained it was a little experiment to see how Johnny would react. Johnny handled it flawlessly. Rather than shutting down the joke, he leaned into it, demonstrating once again his unparalleled skill as the king of live, unscripted television.